It began with something small, so small that Daniel almost laughed it off. One Thursday evening, after a long day at work, he sat in his living room with the TV muted, staring at the reflection of a lamp on the wall. His shadow stretched against the plaster, elongated by the soft amber glow. He lifted his arm to sip from his beer and froze. The shadow didn't move with him. It hesitated, just for a beat, like a film reel catching on a frame. Daniel blinked and set his drink down, heart skipping. Maybe he was tired. Maybe the alcohol had messed with his head. He stood, waved both arms like an idiot, and his shadow followed, smooth, normal, obedient. The moment passed, the room was still again. He almost laughed, muttering, "Jesus, Dan, you're losing it." But later that night, brushing his teeth, he caught it again. In the bathroom mirror, his shadow against the shower curtain seemed slow, like it wanted to wait. The toothbrush slipped from his mouth, foam dribbling down his chin. He snapped the light off, bolted to bed, and told himself it was nothing. The first week, he treated it like a game. When he waved, he checked how closely the shadow obeyed. Sometimes it was perfect. Sometimes it lagged behind, just a fraction of a second. But then once, it lifted its head higher than he had. That was the first time Daniel felt true cold in his chest, a fear that wasn't playful. He didn't tell anyone. How could he? Hey, my shadow's acting weird? He'd sound insane. So he ignored it, forced himself into routine, work, dinner, bed. Don't look too long at the walls. Don't pay attention when you catch something off. But the shadow wanted attention. One morning, he stumbled into the kitchen half asleep. The sun was spilling through the blinds, painting thin stripes across the floor. He reached for a mug, and there it was. His shadow, lying wrong. The lines of light cut across him naturally, but the shadow had its head turned, tilted, watching him. Daniel jerked back so hard he hit the counter. The mug slipped from his hand and shattered, coffee grinds scattering like dirt. His shadow didn't move to match the shock. It just stayed tilted, that black outline of a head cocked at an angle like a curious dog. Only when Daniel sprinted to the hallway did it finally snap into place, dragging behind him like something reluctant. That night, he drank until he passed out on the couch. The dreams came first. Faces made of ink, sliding along walls, pressing their fingers out of two-dimensional spaces. He woke drenched in sweat, the TV still buzzing static. He staggered into the bathroom, flicked the light on, and nearly screamed. His shadow was smiling. It was faint, not detailed, but the impression was unmistakable. A curve where his mouth wasn't, eyes too wide in the smear of darkness. Daniel punched the switch off and stood in pitch black, gasping, afraid to turn it on again. When he finally did, the smile was gone, his own outline normal again. He didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next few days blurred. He stayed late at the office, surrounded by fluorescent lighting and people, anything to avoid the quiet apartment. But shadows followed you everywhere. In the break room, he noticed it again. His coworkers moved normally, their silhouettes following faithfully. His didn't. It lingered. Once, it even stepped closer to another man's outline, overlapping as if testing. Daniel shoved back from the table, muttering an excuse, his coworkers giving him weary looks. Friday night, it escalated. He came home late, dropped his keys on the counter, and noticed the blinds shifting in a breeze, but the windows were closed. He froze. His chest tightened as he saw it. On the far wall, his shadow stood, facing him, not matching him, not attached to his body at all. Daniel backed toward the door. His pulse thundered. He blinked hard. When his eyes opened, the shadow was gone back to normal, stretching across the wall in sync with him. He didn't sleep that night either. The following week, he started seeing it in public. At the grocery store, he froze in the dairy aisle when he saw his shadow extend across the tile, longer than it should, curling around the feet of an old woman. She shivered, glanced around, and whispered a prayer under her breath, Daniel left his cart and ran. At night, it grew bolder. When he lay in bed, he'd catch it shifting on the wall, just slightly, like it was breathing. Sometimes it was there before he entered a room, waiting. He couldn't deny it anymore. This wasn't his imagination or exhaustion or alcohol. His shadow wasn't his, and it was learning. One night, around 3 a.m., he woke to the faint creak of floorboards. His apartment was small, 1 bedroom, no upstairs neighbors. Slowly he sat up. The hallway was dark, lit faintly by streetlight, and there on the wall, his shadow moved. But Daniel hadn't. He sat frozen as the silhouette stepped slowly into the hall, peering into his bedroom. For the first time, Daniel realized it was coming closer. Daniel barely breathed, terrified that even the sound of his chest rising and falling might give him away. The figure on the wall was his outline, yes, but slightly wrong. The shoulders sloped lower, the head seemed narrower, the arms dangled too long at the sides. He forced himself not to move. Maybe if he stayed still, it would too. But the shadow stepped forward. The sound came with its soft thumps of invisible feet on the carpet. Daniel's stomach flipped. It wasn't just on the wall anymore. It was in the room. He bolted upright, fumbling for the lamp. Light flooded the bedroom. His shadow was back where it belonged, splayed obediently against the floor. Daniel's body shook. He sat there until dawn, the lamp burning bright, afraid to blink. By morning, his eyes were red and raw. He tried convincing himself it was stress, insomnia, some hallucination brought on by exhaustion. He called in sick to work, telling his boss he had a stomach bug, then sat at his kitchen table staring at the floor. His coffee went cold. He couldn't shake the image of the shadow walking on its own. The silence pressed against his skull. He grabbed his jacket and left, desperate for noise, people, anything normal. At the diner down the street, he ordered pancakes he didn't touch. The waitress, a girl with tired eyes and a cheerful smile, asked if he was okay. He wanted to tell her everything, wanted someone else to say it out loud. Instead, he muttered, "Didn't sleep," and forced a weak smile. But when she walked away, he saw his shadow stretching along the tiled floor. Not just his own outline, but with something new. Details. Faint features beginning to emerge. A nose too sharp, lips curled into the ghost of a grin. Daniel kicked his chair back, panic spiking. His shadow didn't mimic the movement. It stayed seated. He nearly fell scrambling out of the diner, the waitress calling after him. Outside, sunlight scorched the sidewalk, and still he swore he felt it, his shadow watching. That night, he taped blankets over his windows, sealed every crack where a light might sneak through. If he couldn't see his shadow, maybe it couldn't see him. He drank until his head throbbed, until sleep finally dragged him under. But dreams came instead. He dreamed of standing in his living room, thought the walls were covered in shadows. Dozens of them, faces blurred, arms twitching, heads jerking in unnatural ways. They didn't belong to him. They didn't belong to anyone. And in the center stood his own, smiling wide now, eyes hollow pits. When Daniel woke, he screamed before he realized he was awake. His body was covered in sweat. He stumbled to the bathroom to splash water on his face, but when he looked up into the mirror, there was nothing behind him. No shadow. He staggered back, heart hammering. He turned the bathroom light on and off, waving his arms like a lunatic. Nothing. The walls were bare. For one blissful second, relief washed over him. It was gone. Then the bulb flickered, just once. And in that flash, he saw it, his shadow grinning from the shower curtain, head cocked, waving at him. He backed out of the bathroom and slammed the door, hands trembling so violently he nearly dropped his phone. He dialed 911 before his brain even caught up. When the dispatcher answered, he stammered, "There's something in my apartment." His voice cracked, pathetic. "Sir, is someone trying to break in?" the calm voice asked. No, it's inside. It's me, but it's not me. There was a pause. Sir, are you in danger? Daniel swallowed, staring at the bathroom door, watching faint movements under the crack where light spilled out, a shape shifting, pacing. Yes, he whispered. I think I am. The police came, 2 officers. They searched his apartment top to bottom, checked the locks, inspected the windows. One of them even opened the bathroom door and looked inside. Nothing. Daniel's cheeks burned with shame as he tried to explain shadows moving on their own. The officers exchanged a glance, the kind that said they'd seen their fair share of lunatics. They told him to get some rest, maybe talk to a doctor, then left him standing hollow in the doorway. He locked the door, slid down against it, and cried into his hands. When he finally raised his head, the room across from him, the living room, was dim in the afternoon light. His shadow stretched long across the wall, and it wasn't crying. It was smiling again. Daniel's sobs broke off in his throat. He scrambled to his feet and ran to the kitchen. The knives gleamed in their block. For one horrifying moment, he considered ending it, just to stop whatever this was. But his shadow tilted its head, waiting, as if daring him. He dropped the knife. The next day, he left work early and drove 2 hours to his sister's house. He hadn't visited her in months, but desperation outweighed embarrassment. She greeted him with warmth, hugging him tight, asking what was wrong. He opened his mouth to explain, but froze. On the wall behind her, his shadow lingered, and it turned toward her. Daniel's sister, Megan, didn't notice. She was busy leading him into the kitchen, talking about her kids' school projects, the bills piling up, the usual noise of suburban life. Daniel tried to listen, tried to act normal, but his gaze kept darting to the wall. His shadow was standing behind her, not with him, not matching his movements, standing and looking at her. He clenched his fists so hard his nails dug crescents into his palms. Danny? Megan frowned. You okay? He forced a smile. Yeah, just tired. Long drive. But his shadow cocked its head, mimicking her posture instead of his. When she reached for a coffee mug, it lifted an arm the same way. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The rest of the evening was unbearable. At dinner, he avoided looking at the walls. Every time he glanced up, his shadow was doing something wrong, leaning closer to Megan, sitting straighter than him, staring across the table with eyes that weren't there but that he swore he felt. That night, he lay awake in the guest room. The hall light glowed faintly under the door. Shadows stretched across the carpet. He squeezed his eyes shut, but he heard it. The faintest creak of footsteps, not hers, not the kids. He knew that rhythm now. Too slow, too deliberate. When he opened his eyes, his shadow was on the ceiling, stretched unnaturally thin, crawling. Daniel bit down on his fist to keep from screaming. He left before dawn. He told Megan he had an emergency at work, kissed her cheek, and fled. She looked worried, but she didn't press. He didn't want her to. If she asked the wrong question, if she saw what he saw, he wasn't sure what would happen. Back at his apartment, the silence was unbearable. He turned on every light, every lamp, and blasted the TV just to drown out his own breathing. He barely noticed he hadn't eaten in days. His reflection in the dark screen looked sickly, hollow-eyed. His shadow loomed behind him, not sitting the same way, shoulders pulled back like it was standing at attention. Daniel laughed bitterly. What the hell do you want from me? He asked the empty air. The shadow tilted its head in response. He didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, he went to work for the first time in a week, hoping routine might save him. The office was bright, sterile, safe, or so he thought. In the meeting room, as his boss droned on about quarterly reports, Daniel glanced at the wall and felt his chest ice over. His shadow wasn't sitting. It was standing over his boss. Its long fingers hovered near the man's head, twitching like it wanted to grab hold. Daniel jerked in his chair, knocking his coffee across the table. Everyone turned to stare. His boss scowled. "Problem, Mr. Harris?" Daniel stammered an apology and bolted for the restroom. He locked himself in a stall, pressed his head against the cold metal, and tried to breathe. His mind was unraveling. He couldn't keep living like this. Maybe he needed a doctor. Maybe he needed a priest. When he finally dared to step out, he stopped dead. On the bathroom wall, his shadow wasn't alone anymore. 2 others stood beside it. Fainter, thinner, like they hadn't fully formed. But there they were, new shadows, mimicking no one in the room. For a long moment, Daniel stared, unable to process it. His own shadow turned to him, as if pleased with what it had done. That was the first time he screamed in public. He was sent home. That night, he tried to drown it out with alcohol again, but no amount of whiskey dulled the terror. The shadows were multiplying. He saw them on the ceiling, the walls, the floor. Faces forming in their black smears, not his, not anyone's. They watched him, and worse, they moved when he didn't. He tried turning off the lights. Bad idea. The dark swallowed the room whole. Then suddenly the shadows were everywhere. Breathing, whispering. He couldn't hear words, only the scrape of something trying to speak. He flicked the lights back on and sobbed. By the 4th day, Daniel wasn't eating, wasn't answering calls, wasn't showering. He sat in his living room with every bulb blazing, sweating from the heat. His phone buzzed again, Megan. He let it ring. Then he froze. On the wall opposite him, his shadow was holding a phone to its ear. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. The thing nodded as if listening to someone. Then it tilted its head toward him, smile widening, and raised its free hand in a slow, mocking wave. Daniel lost it. He hurled the lamp, shattering the bulb, plunging the room into half-darkness. And in that moment, he realized the truth. It wasn't his shadow anymore. It never had been. Daniel didn't leave his apartment for days. He dragged his mattress into the living room where he could keep the lights blazing overhead. The electric bill would destroy him, but he didn't care. Every bulb in the place glared down, bleaching the walls. Still, the shadows clung to corners, stubborn stains on reality that wouldn't burn away. He slept in short bursts, waking at every creak. He stopped checking the time. The world outside shrank until it didn't matter. Only the apartment, only the light, only the shadows. On the 5th night, the power flickered, just once, barely a hiccup. But it was enough. In that blink of darkness, the walls writhed. When the light came back, they were waiting dozens now. Figures without owners. Black shapes crowding his small apartment, stretching across the ceiling, clustered in corners like insects. And in the center, his shadow. It stepped forward, no longer attached to him, no longer bound by his body. It smiled that unnatural grin and raised one long hand. The others mimicked the gesture, a silent chorus of mockery. Daniel fell to his knees. "What do you want from me?" His voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. The shadow cocked its head. Then, impossibly, it opened its mouth. No sound came out, but all the others did. A low, rumbling whisper filled the room, hundreds of voices layered together, pressing against his skull until he thought his ears would burst. Words tried to form, but melted into static, a language that wasn't meant for him. He clamped his hands over his ears, screaming, "Stop, please stop." The shadows leaned closer. His own reached a hand toward him. Its fingers ended just above his chest, inches away, trembling like it longed to touch. Daniel bolted. He shoved past the mattress, tripped over a broken lamp, and sprinted for the door. His bare feet slapped against the floor, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. He didn't look back, not even when the whispers followed him down the hall. He made it outside. The night air was cold, sharp in his lungs. Streetlights painted the empty road. For the first time in weeks, he felt the open sky above him. Then he noticed the street was lined with shadows. Not from trees, not from buildings. Figures, dozens of them. Some tall, some crawling on all fours, some twisted into shapes that no body could make. They lined the sidewalks like an audience, all facing him. Daniel staggered back, bile rising in his throat. His own shadow stretched behind him under the glow of the lamp, but when he turned, nothing was there, only pavement. When he looked forward again, his shadow was standing in the road. It was three-dimensional now. A man-shaped figure of pure darkness, taller than him, its head too narrow, its grin stretched ear to ear. It stepped closer. Daniel ran. His legs pumped, lungs burning. He didn't know where he was going. He only knew he had to get away. He cut through alleys, across streets, past darkened storefronts. The city was asleep, silent. Every light he passed cast new shadows, and in each one, he saw it hiss, following, grinning. Finally, he burst into a gas station. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A lone cashier looked up, startled. "You okay, man?" Daniel collapsed against the counter, gasping. "Please, don't let the lights go out, please." The cashier frowned. Sure. You need the lights flickered?" Daniel screamed. In the brief blackout, the walls filled with writhing shapes. When the light returned, the cashier was staring at him wide-eyed. What the hell was that? Daniel froze. His chest seized. The cashier saw them. The shadows weren't just his anymore. The glass door behind him went black as something pressed against it. His shadow, smiling, waiting. He bolted into the aisles, knocking over shelves, searching for something, anything. His hands closed around a red plastic can, gasoline. He didn't think, just acted. Moments later, he was outside, splashing the fuel across the pavement, across the shadows that stretched toward him. He struck a match with shaking hands. For one brief second, the flame was his salvation. Then the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the street. The match sizzled in the sudden void. The shadows rushed in. His scream tore through the night, and then it was gone. Weeks later, Megan reported her brother missing. Police searched his apartment, found signs of paranoia blankets nailed over windows, shattered lamps, knives left on counters. But no Daniel. What unsettled them most was the living room wall. In the glare of their flashlights, dozens of shadows clung to the plaster. They moved slightly, like they were breathing, and among them was one that smiled.